Hello and welcome to the West Ham Breakdown podcast with me, Jack Alderton, and my mate Callum Goodall. In a week where West Ham lost 5-1 to Liverpool and then managed to pick up a 1-1 draw against Brentford at the Gtech in a game, admittedly, we were probably hoping to win. It's not exactly the right result we were looking for, but there are some positives to talk about in there. And that is the game we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about the Liverpool match. Why go there, right? I mean, it's just going to put us through hell. So we're going to move straight on to Brentford. There were some things that were okay, and the Liverpool match is worth saying, and it wasn't all quite so bad. I don't want it to make it sound like it was an absolute horror show. It was massively affected at the end by the red card and the number of chances Liverpool were able to generate in the last 5-10 minutes. But Brentford, really interesting match. Not perfect for sure. Probably didn't generate enough quality opportunities, and obviously conceded the goal really early, which had a big impact on how we were able to play the game, and also how Brentford actually approached the game from that point onwards as well. But it's our lowest pressing intensity performance of the season, or second lowest, lowest since Manchester City, and it seemed like the simple 4-3-3 that we were desperately crying out for in the last podcast finally arrived. Much less complicated approach to the out of possession ideas, and a much more stable and successful, if a little boring, performance as a result.
100%. I think, as we expected, we simplified it. I think you had to, as you say, coming off the back of obviously a 5-1 disappointing 5-1 loss in the cup, and then before that a 3-0 loss to local rivals in the league. I think you do kind of have to just dig in, and it felt as though, I think both of us on the pod have said we wanted the win, but I think for the team it was probably more important that we didn't lose. I know that there's a lot made about the idea of stopping the rot, but like, if ever there was a game to just really be like, right, we cannot lose, let's just focus on doing the simple things well, taking our chances when they come. We probably could have done that a lot better, but we did create a lot more than we're used to. But the main thing was that I think we limited what is generally a very physical team, arguably even more physical, I think, on the day, because of the lineup that they went out with. They basically had 5 centre-backs on the pitch. So it was, I was pleased with how we handled ourselves across the board. And I think it's nice sort of to come out of it thinking it's a draw that we probably could have won, rather than a draw that we probably should have lost, which I think has potentially been the case other times so far this season.
Yeah, it's probably the first performance in what feels like a little while where we had at least patches of the game where we were probably the better side. I'm not sure that extended for very long for much of the game. Brentford had a dominant period in the second half, even if the second half weirdly felt almost a little bit better than a lot of the first half did. And we're going to go into sort of how the game panned out. I think I do want to start with the out of possession stuff, because I think it's been the big focus really, and a lot of what's been going wrong with us. And I led at the top with that lower intensity performance across the board. We saw us play way more passive without the ball in settled possession, which might be a little bit of a surprise against Brentford, a team that you probably think you could go out and press more aggressively, especially without Norgard there, especially without Jensen also there, 2 players that are incredibly important to Brentford in terms of their ability to progress play and also just sort of comfortably move the ball around in their own third. But we were far more passive against them in settled possession. What did look good, though, and it is really important to draw the line between these two different things, is that we pressed really quite well from set play situations, from throw-ins and goal kicks. We were able to generate a lot of turnovers in the middle third. We were able to force the ball long quite successfully on a number of occasions, and on a handful of occasions we did win it high as well. So in those simpler moments where it's a little bit easier to coordinate your press, and you're able to force the ball much more clearly into very much more defined areas of the pitch, if you like, I felt that we functioned quite well. And then the other stuff, we just gave ourselves a much easier job, really, by sitting off a lot more.
Yeah, completely agree. I think one of the biggest issues we've seen recently is that those moments where we try to counter-press and do it ineffectively, we're just so easy to carve open through the middle. And I think that is something that was clearly a focus going into this game. It was something that we could not let happen. And I think with Soucek in there, alongside Paquetá and Soler in each half, in that central midfield spot with Rodriguez behind, it looked a lot more comfortable. I think, like you say, we didn't have loads of the ball, but out of possession, I never really felt, bar that first minute, which, whatever. Brentford 3 games in a row now, great. Doesn't excuse the terrible defending, because I think we had so many times to get it out. But bar that first minute, there wasn't really that many times where I felt particularly threatened. And I think sort of, as a sort of addendum to what you said with regards to the set pieces and the goal kicks, I think also we used sort of the wide areas, which is something that we've seen at West Ham for a long time. I think we pressed really effectively in those wide areas, using the touchline as an extra defender, as people tend to say. And I think that hopefully will be a pattern as we move forward. Doesn't mean to say that I wouldn't like to see us improve in terms of being able to force central turnovers. But I think, again, given where we are at the minute, where we are on a macro level in this journey, but also the place we find ourselves on a micro level in terms of our recent form, I think taking out that complicated stuff, going back to what the squad have historically been able to do quite well, but also something that's a lot easier to coach, made a lot of sense. And it was really pleasing to see it play out on the pitch. And I think if you compare the numbers to the previous game where it was so bad against Chelsea, we flew up in terms of our duel success, both aerially and in terms of defensive duels. And I think that would be an impressive uptick anyway, considering the sort of nadir that we were at and the rise that we took from it. But also to come away from a game where you've outperformed Brentford by 20% in duels on the deck is really important when you consider, as we say, the personnel that they've got in there with Janelt, Collins, Van der Berg and Ayer on either side of that back four as well, Pinnock too. It's not an easy feat. So to have been able to do that both aerially and defensively is really pleasing.
Yeah, and in some ways, when you look at the lineup that they've got at the moment with what they have available, it makes quite a lot of sense to sit off against them in a way, because the threat that they have is in behind with players like Mbermo and Carvalho and Sharda, and we really limited the space that those players had to get into. Yes, it meant they had quite a lot of the ball and they were able to build up attacks quite successfully, but they weren't really able to generate anything from those moments. And that's really reflected in the first half, that although it did feel pretty torrid at times, you look from minute 2 to minute 34, and Brentford don't have a single shot and we have 9, which is kind of exactly what you'd be hoping for from a Lopetegui system. Yes, you're looking at those 9 shots and saying probably the quality of chance isn't quite there, but that's something that has often been the case with Lopetegui teams. And actually more so, what you're trying to do is you're trying to limit the opposition's ability to generate promising attacking moments. And a lot of that was done not just because of how much more successfully we defended, partly by doing what we've just described and sitting off a little bit more, whilst still pressing from those set play situations, but also from what we did with the ball, where that maintenance of the 3-2 base, which is something we've spoken about a lot this season. If we think about how we usually describe it, we're talking about distances in midfield. So in those first couple of podcasts, we were talking about Soucek playing really far forward, and Rodriguez or Alvarez or whoever it was dropping into the back line, and Paquetá being like a completely on his own in midfield, and it being really difficult to deal with those defensive transition moments. Those distances were so much better here. And it's because when there were rotations, whether one player goes forward and joins the front line or another player comes into the centre and gets on the ball, we saw other players reacting to those moments and always looking to maintain that security of the 3-2 base, making it difficult, or much more difficult, for Brentford in transition, and making it easier for us actually to keep hold of the ball. Don't always have to take the most aggressive and direct option. Yes, I think we probably still were too direct at points in this game. There are still moments in the first half where Paquetá does get on it in the middle and he sort of thinks, well, here we go, I'm just going to smash a ball into the box again. And there's a couple of situations where it's particularly egregious, one where he forces the ball down the centre in exactly the way that we've been describing, through ball over the top to nobody, and another where he picks it up on the left-hand side and he just sort of turns and punts a cross in when there's just no one. I mean, he's so far away from the box, he's never even going to get the ball into the box with this attempted cross. So of course, that still needs to come on a little way, but just the fact that little things that actually it was often Thomas Soucek doing, just making the right decision of, Rodriguez has gone into the back line, I'll come out of the front line now and drop in alongside Lucas. It makes it a little bit easier for us to keep the ball. And if we lose it, I'm going to be here to make a tackle or delay a counter attack and give us an opportunity to recover. Yeah,
100%. And I think one of the most pleasing things was that I think when you look at Soucek, you know that he's going to do that, right? Like, that's his bread and butter. He's always been good at that, and that's what he's in the team for. But I think we kind of saw it across the board, probably from players as well that I wouldn't necessarily expect. So I think there was a moment, and I'd prefer it didn't happen because it came from his own mistake, but there was a moment where Paquetá tried to clip a little ball down the line into Emerson. Emerson's made the run, but Brentford intercept it, and rather than sort of counter-press aggressively as Lucas Paquetá would ordinarily do, he sort of dropped back and took up Emerson's left-back position to maintain that defensive line. Now, I don't necessarily want Paquetá in that scenario, but to me, it speaks to an understanding that's starting to bleed through from the coaching staff. If you've managed to convince Paquetá that he needs to drop off and allow Emerson, as the player that's closest to the ball, to be the one that goes to make that, and he's sort of prioritising that structure ahead of him sort of putting himself first, or his desire to have an immediate impact first. So I think that was really positive. And again, I think, as you say, to bring it back to Soucek, I think on that right-hand side, we just looked so much less vulnerable, particularly, I guess my mind goes back to that goal against Chelsea where Wan-Bissaka was caught out of position, and it was Edson Alvarez that was having to cover the right-back position against Jackson. And there was just, partly because he has no pace, but Soucek doesn't have pace either, but he still handled it. It was that positional awareness to just know to be within the right sort of radius of the threat and to be able to mop it up when it does turn over, and know that you're going to be able to reach the player within, or the space, the zone, within the right amount of time before it becomes a real issue. So I think that, solidified the base massively, in combination with the fact that across the board, people seem to have a better understanding of, you've gone, so I'll go here, or I've gone, so you need to go here. And whether that's a communication thing, whether it's a thing that's coming with time, regardless, it's something that we've wanted to see, and fingers crossed it's something we see beyond just the one Brentford game.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you mentioned Soucek doing it, and that dropping in behind the right back. There's a moment in the first half where Wan-Bissaka goes out, and Soucek naturally drops a few yards off into the space, but he sees that Carvalho is actually dropping deeper to get on the ball. So he jumps back out, races in, makes a tackle, forces a turnover. Bowen picks it up, drives towards the edge of the box, and then Soucek just makes the simple choice, gets on the ball with him, combines with him, and generates a shooting opportunity for us. And it all comes from those just much more simple ideas about, let me just cover in this situation, rather than jumping up and trying to press really aggressively as well. And I think that does come, at least in part, from two big shifts in personnel for this game, where Edson Alvarez obviously unavailable and Soucek comes in, and there's no real way to describe the difference between those two players at the moment without at least addressing the fact that Soucek is a million times more reliable right now than Edson Alvarez is. Alvarez's decision making is so unbelievably inconsistent at the moment, and actually causing us a lot of problems. He's diving in way too much. He's being way too aggressive in too many situations, and it's causing us a lot of problems, whereas Soucek was just way more comfortable, way more relaxed, and gave us a much better base to build from. And same at the back, really, with Mavropanos and Todibo. Mavropanos dropping out of the team and Todibo coming in. Now, Mavropanos has been really good in his duels this season, and we're going to come to talking about him in the next section because he comes on right back at half-time in this game. But Todibo, you didn't see any of that. He wasn't jumping up into midfield to try and win things back desperately and creating gaps behind him. It was just a much more kind of relaxed, calm, dominant centre-back performance, good on the cover, covering the right back on a few occasions, winning tackles. Much calmer to watch for sure. Much less scary to watch.
Yeah, I was very pleased with the performance. I think, as you say as well, that calmness probably was less necessary in this game because of the introduction of Soucek ahead of him, but I think you can see how in the midfield of Alvarez, Guido and Paquetá, all of whom have questionable decision-making at times, and all of whom are sort of hardwired to press or to try and snap into tackles when the possibility arises, even against their better judgment, perhaps. So when you have Mavropanos behind them, who also likes to step up, it does make sense that these opportunities have arisen for the opposition throughout the course of the season. So having Todibo, who, to be fair as well, I mean, from when we watched him last season, there definitely was moments where he did like to spring up and do the Mavropanos thing. But I suppose for someone who's clearly been on the training pitch going, right, what do I need to get into this team while Mavropanos is doing not the best job, but still getting to start ahead of me. Max Kilman's doing wonderfully well. What do I need to do to get in? Well, I need to prove that when Lopetegui does select me, I execute his game plan to perfection. And I think he did that. He took the instructions, and probably against his stylistic nature, which I think is to be a bit more proactive, front-footed, he took the instructions and, as you say, had a really solid sort of, I wouldn't say unassuming game because I did come away from it feeling it was noticeable how well he played. But one of those games where he just didn't really do anything wrong. So it's not the first name sort of on the tip of your tongue as you walk away from the stadium.
Yeah, he also circulated the ball a little bit better, less likely to get the ball stuck under his feet like Mavropanos does at times. And yeah, just a solid performance all around. The only note for him really is on a couple of set pieces. He was caught positionally a little bit flat with balls coming into the box, and probably lucky on 2 occasions to get away with it. One where he just about managed to get his head there. I mean, very, very, very lucky, I think, to get there in time to be able to head it over our own bar. And then another where Pinnock almost got in behind him and he sort of had to impede him. It wasn't enough for a penalty, but again, if his body position is a bit better and his reaction is a bit better, he doesn't end up in that situation in the first place. But for sure, apart from that, a really positive full Premier League debut. So we referenced it there with Mavropanos coming on at half-time, and he wasn't the only substitute brought on at half-time. Emerson brought off for him, and then also Kudus brought off for Carlos Soler coming on the wing for the second half. Maybe a bit of a surprise that he was chosen over Konstantinos Mavropanos. Actually, just a big surprise that Kudus had been hooked in the first place. In fact, to be honest, really surprising substitutions, because you would think it would either be maybe Sofal or Cresswell ahead of Mavropanos to come on at fullback, and you certainly wouldn't think Soler would be the first option to come on to replace Kudus. But hey, I think we've been saying this quite a lot this season. They worked, right? He's made 2 really inspired second half substitutions yet again.
Yeah, they worked incredibly well. I think Soler's impact was almost instantaneous. I think, as we spoke about in the first half, we were a lot more passive with regards to our press in the first half, but also just throughout the game generally. But with that first 15-minute window after the second half, I felt there was a massive shift in intensity out of possession with the introduction of Soler, and this was borne out in the numbers. I think for the game we had 18.5-ish PPDA, but that first 15-minute interval just after the break with the subs on the pitch, it dropped all the way down to 6. So it's a real step up, and I think that does come with the fact that Soler's understanding of when to counter-press, how to counter-press effectively, and being the first one on the scene whenever a turnover happens. He seemed to just always be there ahead of anyone because presumably because he just watches the game so well. He's just following the ball around and making sure that he's within a distance that's close enough to get there at speed, and I thought that was really promising. Also just felt like in terms of progression as well, he was really effective in terms of the passes that he picked, the circulation, knowing when to pick the right moment. And then Mavropanos, I thought, again, out on that sort of that right back role that sort of looked like a lateral centre back at times with Wan-Bissaka getting so advanced, it looked really promising. I think we know what he's like up against dribblers. I think he locked it down pretty well in both his aerials and his defensive duels. So yeah, really inspired in both substitutions, and I think it led to it was the basis for the second half that was to come, which I think was much improved, really.
Well, at least for those first 15 minutes, it was much improved, right? Because I'm not sure about the half an hour that came after that. We will get onto that, and I don't think that was as much down to the substitutions or the tactics or anything. It was a lot to do with issues that we're having up front at the moment. But yeah, I want to give credit to Soler as well. I'm going to repeat, I think, what you said, which is a bit of there's a thing you shouldn't do on podcasts, but I feel like I'm so positive about how he played that I almost have to echo what you said. Counterpress was so much better with him on the pitch. His anticipation was so good, and he generated a big chance for Somerville because of it. When he wasn't generating chances, he was forcing the ball forward and creating turnovers for us. It was just so much better than what we've seen from really any of the other forwards this season in those counterpress moments. So really, really impressive and progressive without the wastage. We've been seeing from Paquetá all season, yes, he's progressive. Yes, he gets the ball forward for us. But he introduces an incredible amount of wastage. He loses the ball far too often. He creates too many dangerous turnover situations, and he's not good enough himself in defensive transition to alleviate the problems he then creates when making poor decisions on the ball. Whereas Soler, no real wastage at all, really, after he came on. Simple options, always the right ones. Couple of more complicated passes, but picked the right moment to play those balls. He played a really nice outside of the football over the top for Paquetá on one occasion. A couple of other nice balls out to the left side when he was in central areas later in the game. But often very simple, and that made us better. It made it easier for us to control the game. It made it easier for us defensively. And then, like I say, almost the inverse of Paquetá, when he if he is creating a problem, which he didn't in this game, but if a teammate created a problem, he improved us in those defensive transition moments, and made it much easier for us to win the ball back quickly. So really, really impressive performance. And Mavropanos, much the same as what you said as well. I won't go into much depth on that. I wasn't hugely pleased with the performances I saw of him playing right back at Stuttgart, and thought that defensively it looked a bit weird at times. Positionally, he seemed a bit confused sometimes about how aggressively to engage wingers. Didn't have that problem against Brentford. It was really aggressive, and that was good. It was good. Again, helped us force turnover situations, made us effective going forward. I also thought his aggression on the ball was great. Something that's maybe been a bit lacking from Emerson at times. One touch out of his feet, ball into the box on a number of occasions, and that's what we're looking for from the players in those positions. A couple of really nice balls in as well. So an impressive performance, and with Todibo behind him, it's almost like those moments where he can jump out really overly aggressively and create gaps behind him. We're fine because Todibo's really good at covering the wide spaces in those situations anyway. Plus, then you get all the added dual dominance that Mavropanos brings. Is it an option? Is it an option, Cal?
It's a good question. It's a really good question. I think I wouldn't be against seeing it. And I think right at the start of the season, we sort of spoke about a similar system where we saw Wan-Bissaka as being a fullback who could potentially tuck in to create a situational back three. I think now, 6 games into the season, we've seen that Wan-Bissaka can be as effective from left back in terms of how he can carry, and his ability to also drift inside as well and sort of allow Kudus to hold that width a bit if he's the one that's ahead of him. And that combination play that he's had either around the box or in central midfield areas with the likes of Paquetá, he sort of has been able to develop relationships very quickly. So I think if you sort of have Wan-Bissaka as a left back and have Mavropanos as a right back, factoring in that Emerson hasn't had a particularly impressive start to the season, so I think there is every reason to consider dropping him in favour of Wan-Bissaka, whose form at left back has been better when he has played there. I quite like it because I think it allows you to really commit Wan-Bissaka on that left side, and just you don't really have to commit Mavropanos that much. And you've got a nice back three of Kilman, Todibo and Mavropanos in build-up, which I think is probably as good a 3-2 shape as we could hope for in terms of a base. All fairly dual dominant as well, all comfortable in possession. Kilman's left foot out in the lateral left space, and Mavropanos clipping balls down the flank to the right as well. I think it's a really nice...
He's an aggressive carrier in that spot as well, which is really, really useful. We're going to be talking about on the preview pod for the Ipswich game how teams defend in 4-4-2 blocks, and when you build with a 3, you want your wing-backs to carry it. Immediately creates questions for the wide midfield. You know, there's all these things that naturally Kilman and Mavropanos do very well in those positions that we've actually enjoyed a lot of this season with a midfielder dropping in. But you put Todibo in there, he's probably better than any of our midfielders dropping in those situations, and it's just a better 3 from a build-up perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I think my only concern would be, and as I was saying, I think Wan-Bissaka is probably on form the better left-back than Emerson, so I'd be willing to give it a go. My concern is how it affects the dynamic on that left flank, and also the knock-on effect of what it does to Bowen on the other side if you don't have someone overlapping Bowen. Like, it's fine to have Mavropanos there in terms of build-up, and I know that we said he put a few nice balls into the box, but realistically, he's not going to be an overlapping threat like Wan-Bissaka has been, is he? Let's be honest. You're putting him there because you want him to sort of solidify that 3-back, but also help him build up. So then I worry that Bowen might be a little bit isolated. He'll be asked to hold the width a lot more, and you might sort of lose his impact in those central areas around the box. It's a quirk that you could surely come up with a remedy with, I'm sure. And then on the left side, what does it do to Kudus or Somerville? Is Wan-Bissaka going to overlap, which I guess would be beneficial because it allows them to come slightly more inside, or is Wan-Bissaka naturally going to underlap, which then, as well as pinning Bowen further out, it also puts Kudus or Somerville on the byline as well, which stretches your front 5, which is problematic for us.
And if he overlaps and gets into positive attacking situations at left back, he's more than likely to take a touch off the outside of his boot and come back, which generates enough time for the defence to recover anyway. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. And actually, I do feel a little bit kind of like, well, here we are playing a system that requires wing backs without having signed any once again. So, it doesn't feel like a great place to be arriving in. Maybe we use him like a sort of turret, Mavropanos, out on that right side. You know how we love playing switches? He just someone bangs the ball out there and he just heads it into the box from wide positions. God knows. I look, from a build-up perspective, it does help. And if we had a more natural option on the left side, I'd be probably more willing to entertain it long term. I think ultimately the best solution is, even if it isn't quite as good in build-up, Wan-Bissaka doing that job. Just put him there. He's going to do that quite well, and balance-wise, it's going to make us better as a team. It might even help someone out that we're going to talk about next, Kudus. And the last 2 games, it's not been great, has it?
No, I think everyone was shocked at half-time to see him hooked. I think in the heat of the moment, that probably makes sense because we were losing and he is on paper one of our most impactful players, and therefore you want to...
Yeah, and he was, driving forward with the ball, taking everyone on as he always does.
As he does, for sure. But I think, having gone back to it, I think Bowen was probably more impactful than Kudus had been, and if he deemed that a change was necessary, I think of the 3, it probably would have been the one that you took out. I think Antonio is Antonio, but he had an okay half, feeding off scraps and bringing the ball down. I thought he did a pretty admirable job.
One of his best, probably his best Premier League half so far, and he played well against Liverpool as well. So, nice to see him getting into some at least half decent form.
Yeah, and who he was up against as well in terms of the battles. They're all pretty physical centre-backs, so I think any other shift would probably have been to our detriment. So I understand the frustration. But yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it, with Kudus? Obviously, we all love him, and obviously he's incredibly impactful and probably the most exciting player on the team to watch. But I do find myself getting increasingly frustrated with sort of how one-dimensional is very harsh. But it is 9 times out of 10 head down run. And I think I get frustrated sometimes in the same way that we do with Paquetá, I guess, in terms of how direct he is in terms of forcing it with passes. I feel like sometimes with Kudus, it's like, slow down a bit, maybe just jink back inside and let's slow the build up down, because yes, he's incredibly good at beating his man and getting into these positions, but I think he's almost too good for his own sake, because it's impossible for everyone to catch up. So you find yourself in the final third and it's like, oh shit, well, I'm here now and where are my teammates? So I'm going to have a pop shot, or I think part of the reason we had a lot of chances. We had 19 shots, right? But we failed to make 1 XG in terms of across the game because of how many low quality chances we had. And I think in part this is because there is an element of directness within the team, whether it is Paquetá, whether it is Kudus, also Bowen sometimes. And I think just to slow things down a bit makes sense. And I think, as you say, with the introduction of Soler, someone who did that and helped us do that, we saw the benefits straight away. So I understand the frustrations with the Kudus sub, but I think it sort of played out that it was probably a good switch, all things considered. But yeah, on a more macro level, I guess what is the fix now? Because Kudus for 2 games has been less effective than we would like, and I don't think just running at defenders is the solution, because against better opposition that aren't so vulnerable to direct carriers, Brentford are one of, if not the most in Europe, as we said. Chelsea, again, their lateral centre-backs were, so it made sense. But I think against certain opposition, that directness is going to be more of a hindrance.
Yeah, so they're very much capturing the spirit of a younger Manuel Lanzini in midfield in the second half. And Kudus, look, I think he's bought himself a couple of poorer games, hasn't he? Let's not all get on his back. He's bought himself this. He's been so good for us that, yes, he's been off the boil a little bit in the last 2 Prem matches. We haven't been quite there as a unit. And I'm cautious to kind of make sweeping conclusions about him or even the dynamics of the team and him playing on the left, when he quite clearly, in terms of his own individual actions, whether they're on the left, right or wherever, hasn't quite been getting things right. There's a couple of moments. There's one moment where he passed the ball straight out of play, trying to find Emerson again. There were 2 moments where he allowed Van den Berg to just walk right past him and didn't show the kind of usual aggression without the ball that we're used to seeing from.
I think, he had the most tackles in the league, right, last season, in terms of a player in that position. So
just looks slightly out of sorts, and for that reason, I'm cautious about saying, oh, it's because he's on the left, and if he was on the right, you fix all of it immediately, or if you play him at number 10, you fix it all straight away. I'm not sure about that right now. I think his level of performance isn't quite there, and I wonder if that's just more about him having a little bit of a dip, which is fine. He's more than earned it. But someone does need to sit him and Paquetá down and go, David Moyes is not here any longer, my friends.
Yeah.
Calma. Chill out. You know, yeah. It's nice that you want to dribble past 7 people on the break. We're not doing that anymore. You've won the ball. Let's have the ball now. So, yeah, there's a number of moments where he does go for those really exciting, dynamic dribbles, and no one's with him. So it just becomes completely pointless. So, yeah, I think natural that he was substituted in those circumstances, and credit to Lopetegui for seeing it. So many managers would go, Kudus is one of our best players. He stays on no matter what. He can be playing at his worst level. He can be putting in his weakest performance, and he stays on regardless because he's capable of anything. And that is a valid way of looking at things, by the way. It's not. I'm not saying that that's completely wrong to look at things like that. There were many times in previous seasons where, you know, Moyes might have stuck with Jared Bowen when he's not playing very well, and then Bowen would score a goal for us because he was capable of producing those moments, and Kudus much the same. But yeah, I thought in the context of the game, it's probably a good decision to bring him off. A bit of a surprise that Somerville wasn't introduced, and I want to give us just a brief moment to discuss him. A lot of hype, a lot of excitement, earned. He's been really bright, and he was again here. I don't think he's quite ready yet. He's ready. I don't think he's quite done enough yet to push anyone out of the starting lineup. Soler came on, made a really big impact, really changed the game for us. Somerville still a little bit weak in the duels, hold up not quite clean enough, fluffed his 2 big moments in the final third. Yes, he looks bright. Yes, he's making the right runs. Yes, he's combining with teammates quite nicely at times. Those key actions just not quite there yet, and when he does get one of those right, that's when it will get its place in the first team for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a difference at the minute. I think, and partly probably because of the lull that we're in, and sort of the pining for excitement in a otherwise unexciting or underperforming team, right? But there's a big difference between exciting and effective, and I think within the system at the minute, I think Somerville has been incredibly exciting every time we've seen him, probably because of the game states he's been introduced in, but also just because of his pace and how tricky he is with his feet, and sort of how able he is to get in and around the box. But I think, as you say, those final actions, the shots not quite hitting the target or not quite troubling the keeper enough, or the final pass being a few inches off perfect, and it's just not quite clicking yet. And I think whilst, yes, he's exciting, I think, as we saw with the introduction of Soler, within the context of the wider system, and the reason we took Kudus off, because it was a little bit too direct, because it was a little bit too dribble heavy, and we wanted to sort of try and gain a bit more control in those final actions and making those final decisions rather than forcing stuff.
And retain the dual dominance.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, to Soler's credit, he actually amazed me in terms of how many ball recoveries he had around our own box in that second half. Like, he was just popping up, winning the balls, and then making the right decision. He's gone, right, I've just won the ball and I'm going to lay it back and we're going to build up possession now. Whereas... And
actually really strong in the tackle on the edge of the box as well. If it wasn't a recovery, there were, I think, 3 in the second half where he had to just really smash into a tackle to try and win the ball back, and did it really well. Didn't go off his feet, just approached the player, really tough tackle, won the ball back and got us moving forward. So, yeah, I just wanted to raise it because it's so important, and people can sometimes forget the importance in the Premier League of just winning those kinds of duels. And it is the one thing right now, I think, with Somerville that hasn't happened yet. We haven't really seen him go and dominate a tackle yet. He's a little guy, so I don't think it will happen. Which is why I think I land back on the point that, one of these times he's going to receive the ball on the left side, coming on for the last 25 minutes, chop inside and smash the ball into the top corner, and then my hands go up. Go play, right? That's when the change will happen.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, introducing him for a half against the league's most physical side, arguably, is probably not the best introduction, particularly when the issue is that you were already being too direct. It just wouldn't have made sense. It's not because Somerville's not a good player. He's an amazing player, but context is key. And within the context of this game, Soler's introduction definitely made more sense.
So we do another podcast after this every week, right? We do extra time and then we do the preview podcast in a couple of days. And this week we'll be doing that on Ipswich. And if you want to listen to that, head over to patreon.com/Analytics United. There's loads of stuff that I'm actually incredibly proud of that we're doing over there, right down to whether it's Darcy's Player of the Week or Euro Review or even the football film review with Charlie and I. There's loads of fun stuff on there. Really, really enjoying it so far and being incredibly grateful for the number of people that have signed up and are enjoying tuning into all the stuff we're doing on there and joining the Discord and having chats with us throughout the week about West Ham and all the things that are frustrating and pleasing everyone. And every week on the preview podcast, Cal, we say, well, it'll be different this week, hopefully, because Nicholas Fulkrug will come into the team and it will change us in X, Y, and Z ways. And then invariably he's not fit because that calf issue seems to never be resolving. Please, Nicholas, come back, because of all the players that we would have liked to have in this game and all the players that we would have liked to have brought on in the second half, it's definitely him. We missed him terribly, didn't we? And Antonio fell off that cliff that he always falls off. Every week he walks over the same edge on about 60 minutes. And we just didn't, we just looked like we had no idea what to do.
Yep, sadly, no surprises anymore, because it's obvious when he plays that this is what happens. And as you say, unfortunately, we just don't have the person off the bench or the person that should start ahead of him at the minute. We just don't have them ready. Fulkrug is not fit. I'm not sure when he'll be fit. Everything suggests that he's back in training, but hey, who knows? We'll soon find out. But yeah, I think it was abundantly clear in this game. I mean, as we said in the previous section of the pod, I think Antonio actually did a serviceable job in terms of what he was being asked to do, also getting into positions within the box and sort of, albeit fumbling, but still managing to get touches off inside the box and combine.
What are you talking about? It's a wonderful assist. He's gone, for a Mesut Ozil type, smash it into the ground, make them think you're going to shoot, just going to bounce it through to Thomas.
Yeah. But I mean, he was there, like you say, he did the combination stuff, but there were moments where you felt like he was snatching a bit, and there was the one chance that he did have, the sort of snapshot that I think it was difficult. I think it fell to him. He did all the hard stuff, and it was I think by that time he probably couldn't have planted his foot properly, and it was getting away from him. But I think a slightly more instinctive box striker like Fulkrug probably preps himself a little bit better in the first place, so the shot isn't so difficult.
You're too forgiving. He's got to hit the target with that. And there's another moment where he gets the ball on the edge of the box, and I think it's Wan-Bissaka, a very easy option outside him, and he just swings a boot at it and smashes it over the bar. It's just he like you said, he did a serviceable job in this game, and actually some of the decisions he made to drop off into the sort of 9.5 space to get himself away from Pinnock and Collins to then be able to chest the ball off or knock it round the corner. And really nice, did some really good stuff in those moments. But yeah, the difference that we would be able to see with Fulkrug in there, offering that physical presence, but also the cleaner link up and the ability to finish those kinds of chances, which you see how important it's going to become now with the quality of chance that is being generated on average. I mean, we have the lowest chance quality in the league at the moment on average by quite a distance. We're the only team on 0.07, which is a shocking return, I must admit. 0.07 is just absolutely abysmal. And in the last 3 games, it's been getting worse every week. We've been taking worse and worse shots from worse and worse positions. But yeah, if you're going to have someone in those moments who needs to take that one chance, you'd hope it would be Fulkrug, right?
Yeah, you'd really hope so, because I think he has made a career of being that guy, right? He started out as a striker and has been a striker since his youth career, whereas I think with Antonio, it's easy to forget, although no West Ham fan ever would let you, but it's easy to forget that he isn't a striker, right? He started out as a winger, he's played as a wing-back, and by nature, by pure way of his sort of physical dominance and prowess and sort of the happy circumstance that was David Moyes' manager, who needed someone with that exact physical profile up top, he's turned into a striker, and fair play to him. He's, I think was it his 100th goal contribution in the Premier League at the weekend, record breaking for West Ham. Like, we have to give him credit, and he has done unimaginable success at West Ham for sort of what we expect when we brought him in. But you can't rest your hat on him in those situations, because he isn't that sort of natural born instinctive finisher that's been practicing those exact moments since he was 15, 16. He's just ended up at the top end of the pitch as a spearhead and a successful one. But never been the most technically gifted, and now also his physical dominance is waning as well. So I think we probably rely, well, we do, absolutely. I'll hang my hat on this one. We definitely rely on him far too much for someone that is at his point of his career. And it's not his fault, right? It's not his fault at all. He probably doesn't
pick
want
himself.
No, exactly. He doesn't want to be relied upon to this extent, I wouldn't think. But yeah, I think we just have to pray that Fulkrug does come back in and sort of, as you say, I think he can probably offer everything Antonio offers and more in terms of that link up and facilitate, as you say. My hope is that, yes, the chance creation has been poor, but I think, well, my hope is that part of the low quality XG chances we're creating is that the link-up play before the shots are created is not quite what Lopetegui wants it to be yet, and therefore we're having to take the chances as they come. Whereas I think if Fulkrug can bring the players around him in a little bit better, then the shot quality will go up.
Got problems every which way at the moment. Antonio drifts out to the wide areas way too much and then leaves a gap in the centre of the pitch where he should be. Bowen isn't good enough physically to generate the chances in compacted penalty areas that we're now attacking. There's no loads of space with Bowen in behind anymore. It's Bowen with 3 defenders around him. It's way harder. And you need a bigger physical presence to shrug centre-backs off to generate that half yard to get a shot off in the box. Problems there. Ings is the same as Bowen. Same problems, not physical enough to generate those opportunities, and actually often not quick enough when we are arriving in more transition-like scenarios to actually arrive in time to be in the box and support attacks. So whichever of the 3 you go for, it's a problem in terms of generating high-quality chances, and hopefully Fulkrug will improve us from that perspective. Look, we talked a lot about Lopetegui being a proactive manager, making loads of changes, often making changes that improve the side. Why the hell didn't Antonio come off after an hour? And why did we suffer for 10, 15 minutes like we did? We barely had touched the ball for 10, 15 minutes. We basically played 15 minutes away at Brentford in our own box, which was just completely unnecessary because Antonio was left on beyond the point that you're basically playing with 10 men with him on the pitch. I think I put the stats out on Twitter, 46 to 60, spoke about the PPDA going down and our intensity being way better, 57% possession, 6 shots to nothing, 61 to 75 minutes, 30% possession, and 2 shots conceded, no shots created ourselves. I don't get it. I don't get why that substitution wasn't made. And then when it is, it's Danny Ings that comes on. Now, Ings does improve what the team can do as a pressing unit. He presses quite well. He does manage to force the ball long on a number of occasions. His hold-up is no improvement on Antonio after Antonio's gone. It's exactly the same playing with Ings up there as it is with Antonio. And yeah, the pressing does stabilise things a little bit. We ticked up from 30 to 36% possession in the final 15 minutes and generated 2 shots to Brentford's 2. But that last half an hour was definitely the weakest almost of the whole game for us. And it was entirely down to the fact that we lack a serious striker that can do 90 minutes of football at this level anymore. Ings and Antonio are just too tired and too towards the end of their careers to be able to offer that. And I'm saying it again, because I think we said this on Patreon last week. Why is Paquetá not looked at in these situations? He gets hooked because he's not a natural in the circumstances that he's arriving in. Eventually, with Soler moving into the middle and him being sort of quite isolated out on the left wing, especially with Wan-Bissaka supporting him, which is not the same as him on the left wing with Emerson supporting him. So he comes off and Somerville comes on, which sure makes a lot of sense in terms of improving the dynamics on that side. But why not shove him through the middle? He can press really aggressively. In fact, he often presses too aggressively, which is fine. It's the one position in the team where you can basically get away with that.
Yeah.
And he holds the ball up well and he's quite physical. And in terms of his super risky passing, where's the less risky position for him to be doing it? As high up the pitch as possible. I just don't get it. I don't get why that's not looked at as an option in these situations.
Yeah, particularly given that we actually did see it a reasonable amount last season as well. It's not like there isn't a sort of back catalogue of features that he was pretty impressive in, where he did go and play up top in terms of his hold-up. Even long ball stuff as well. We looked to be playing quite direct at times against Brentford, which is part of the reason we probably did lack possession so much, is we didn't build out as nicely as I would have liked towards the back end. But with someone like Paquetá up there versus Ings, like you say, I would back his hold-up to be at least of the level of Ings, if not better, in terms of just how physical he is. And sort of particularly in those moments that if he doesn't win the ball, he's going to be tenacious enough to go and snap up the second ball, or at least force a sort of misguided pass and yeah, as I say, force that turnover. So yeah, it was disappointing not to see it. equally disappointing not to just see. I know we wouldn't have liked to have seen Ings come on, but if you're going to bring Ings on, just do it 15 minutes before. Like, just give him half an hour instead of 15 minutes. We didn't need to suffer for that 15-minute period. We could have just had him off. But yeah, I don't know. I think, like you say, I guess Lopetegui will feel like he's hamstrung to some degree, which he is. But there are better options, I think, than playing Antonio for 75 minutes.
Yeah, I think back to that Wolves game last season, and I think about even the circumstances we were in the match. You've got Pinnock and Collins defending alone because Brentford are pushing so high up the pitch. Take Antonio off, put Somerville on. You've got Soler to supply them. Paquetá can drop off deeper, and you've got two wingers to go beyond. Generate something on the counter. Mm-hmm. You've got the profiles in the squad to be able to do that. So for all the changes that we are capable of making and have made through this season, it felt like the sort of almost the most opportune moment to go back to Moisey and just, you know, restabilize the game and maybe generate a high quality opportunity on the break. So yeah, look, this is not me saying that I think Paquetá should play up front for us, by the way. Let me just be absolutely clear about that. We're both desperate for Frocka to come back, as we've made clear, and we want him to start up top for us. But in these moments where Frocka isn't available and Antonio has done his 60 minutes and is ready to have a bath, you know, that's when I think we could see this. A couple of very small things to tie up at the end of this episode. Guido Rodriguez as a lone single pivot, no thank you. It wasn't very good. You need him to protect you against counter attacks, and he couldn't do that. I think he knows where he needs to be. His legs just can't get him there fast enough, which is a shame. It's just speed of the Premier League stuff, and he needs someone alongside him. We've spoken about it loads. Alvarez should do that role. He should be able to perform that role. He needs to calm down a hell of a lot if he's going to start getting it right. But he's probably the only player in the squad that can do it without creating very scary moments against counter-attacks. Wan-Bissaka, a little bit more aggressive. Too soft against Lewis Potter at times, allowed space to carry into the box, and too many crossing opportunities were generated as a result of Wan-Bissaka being dual aversive when, you know, I like Lewis Potter, but he's not Doku. You know, you don't need to defend against him like he is. And then, yeah, I'll pass over to you for the last of these points, which is, you know, we've spoken about Todibo. I think we briefly mentioned Kilman. Let's talk about the pair of them together. It's a partnership that obviously we want to be seeing for as much of this season as possible. It should be our partnership for many years to come, really. And this was the first proper display with the pair of them together in the Premier League. And yeah, it was good, right? Kilman as good as ever, and Todibo solid alongside him.
Promising signs for sure. I think one of the biggest, like, green flags, I suppose, is that both of them within the 90 minutes showed that they're equally as capable as stepping up and the other one covering and then flipping it around. Like Kilman, we think of as someone who's really capable of dropping deep and sweeping up if the ball gets in behind, because Mavropanos inevitably has stepped up too far. I think Todibo didn't, as we said earlier, wasn't as sort of front-footed as we maybe would have expected based on his track record, but I think that is because of the circumstance and the instructions from Lopetegui. But I think on the moments that he did step up, Kilman still showed that sort of propensity to sit deep. But then at the same time, we saw Kilman getting quite aggressive at times and stepping up to the ball receiver, and Todibo knowing when to drop off. And if I'm looking at sort of what I want to see in the first outing of a new centre-back partnership, it's that understanding of sort of that, not metronomic, but what's that bloody thing that... pendulum like, where one goes forward and the other goes back, and then you switch up at the same times, and then they seem to be working in harmony, and as you say, we all know about the massive upside in build up, and if we get that sort of defensive upside as well, then it looks to be really promising. I think we all wanted to see Todibo sooner, but it looks as though letting him get up to speed and really get to grips with Lopetegui's style has hopefully paid dividends, because to come in straight away again in a physical game like that and be up to pace was really impressive, I thought.
Right game to introduce him. First game where there's not a proper striker, and
fair.
Softest introduction he could possibly have got in the league, I think, against any team. So I think of all the games in which you give him that first start and allow him some opportunity to generate some confidence by putting in a good performance and not throwing him into a million long ball duels in this first match in the Premier League, it's a good one to give him a start in. So yeah, I was really pleased. I think he performed well, and hopefully we'll see him continue to play at that level. I'm not, by the way, saying that he can't handle those duels. I just think your first taste of Premier League action, this was a good one, I think, to get. Cool. If you tuned into this podcast and thought, God, I can't wait for Cal and Jack to talk about that Liverpool drubbing, and you were massively disappointed by the fact that we didn't, the show must go on. We do continue over on Patreon on the West Ham Breakdown Extra Time. Darcy and Charlie will be joining us. We'll chat about the Liverpool game. We'll chat about the week to come, how important the Ipswich game has become as a result of the draw against Brentford, and how scary Ipswich do look after that draw against Villa. No, I'm kidding. We're obviously hoping that we'll be able to get 3 points against them, but I do want to give them some credit, and we'll be talking about that game on the pod to follow. So please do head over there. First 7 days free. We'd love to see you there. Thank you to everyone that has already joined, and if not, we'll catch you next week after that match. Thanks, Cal, and see you then.